You've probably noticed them. The people who seem untouchable by chaos. While everyone around them spirals into panic, they remain steady. While others lose their minds over deadlines, criticism, or unexpected changes, these individuals just breathe deeply and carry on. It's almost unsettling how composed they stay when the world feels like it's falling apart. But here's what most people don't realize about truly calm individuals. Their resistance to stress isn't some magical gift they were born with. It's not luck, and it's definitely not because they live stress-free lives. In fact, many of the calmest people you know have endured more chaos than most. So what makes them different? What invisible armor do they wear that shields them from the emotional storms that knock the rest of us sideways? The answer lies in something psychologists call emotional regulation, but it goes much deeper than that clinical term suggests. These people have rewired their relationship with uncertainty itself. They've learned to dance with discomfort instead of fighting it. And once you understand how their minds work, you'll realize that this kind of unshakable calm isn't reserved for a chosen few. It's a skill anyone can develop, but only if you're willing to unlearn everything you think you know about stress. See, most of us treat stress like an enemy. We resist it, fight it, try to eliminate it from our lives completely. But calm people understand something fundamental that changes everything. Stress isn't the problem. Your response to stress is the problem. They've discovered that the same situation can either destroy your peace or strengthen your resilience, depending entirely on how your mind processes what's happening. This shift in perspective doesn't happen overnight, and it's not about positive thinking or pretending everything is fine. It's about developing a completely different operating system for your emotions. Think about the last time you felt overwhelmed. Your heart probably started racing, your thoughts scattered in a dozen directions, and your body tensed up like you were preparing for battle. That's your nervous system activating what scientists call the stress response. But here's where it gets fascinating. Calm people experience the exact same physiological reactions. Their hearts race too. Their minds register the threat. The difference is what happens next. While most people get hijacked by these sensations, calm individuals have trained themselves to observe them without being controlled by them. They've learned to create space between the trigger and their reaction. This space is where all the magic happens. In that brief pause, they're able to ask themselves questions that completely change the trajectory of their experience. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" they ask, "What can I learn from this?" Instead of thinking, "This is terrible," they wonder, "How can I grow stronger through this?" These aren't empty affirmations or toxic positivity. They're genuine inquiries that redirect their mental energy from panic to problem solving, from victimhood to empowerment, from chaos to clarity. But how do they develop this ability in the first place? It starts with understanding something most people never consider. Your brain is constantly making predictions about what's going to happen next. It's trying to keep you safe by anticipating threats and preparing responses. The problem is, your brain can't tell the difference between a real physical danger and an imaginary future scenario you're worried about. So when you catastrophize about tomorrow's presentation or next month's bills, your body responds as if those imagined threats are happening right now. You flood your system with stress hormones over situations that may never even occur. Calm people have learned to recognize this mental pattern and interrupt it. They understand that 90% of what they worry about never actually happens, and the 10% that does happen is rarely as catastrophic as they imagined. This isn't naive optimism. It's statistical reality based on lived experience. They've trained themselves to stay present instead of getting lost in fearful projections about the future. They've developed what psychologists call present moment awareness, and it's like having a superpower in a world full of anxious time travelers. This present moment awareness manifests in subtle but powerful ways. When faced with a stressful situation, instead of immediately jumping to worst-case scenarios, they pause and assess what's actually happening right now. Not what might happen, not what happened last time something similar occurred, but what's real and true in this exact moment. Often they discover that the present moment is actually quite manageable. The crisis exists mainly in their projections and memories, not in their current reality. There's also something deeper happening in the minds of naturally calm people. They've developed an almost philosophical relationship with uncertainty. While most of us crave control and predictability, they've made peace with the fact that life is inherently unpredictable. They don't waste energy trying to control things beyond their influence. Instead, they focus their attention and effort on the small circle of things they can actually impact. This might sound simple, but it's a profound shift that eliminates enormous amounts of unnecessary stress. Consider how differently calm people approach challenges compared to their anxious counterparts. When something goes wrong, anxious people often spiral into a mental loop of blame, regret, and worry. They replay the situation endlessly, analysing what they should have done differently, predicting all the terrible consequences, and generally making themselves miserable over something they can't change. Calm people, on the other hand, quickly move through a different mental process. They acknowledge what happened, extract any useful lessons, and then shift their focus to what they can do moving forward. They don't deny reality or pretend everything is perfect, but they refuse to torture themselves with mental movies about disasters that exist only in their imagination. This ability to stay solution-focused rather than problem-obsessed is perhaps one of their most valuable skills. While others get stuck in analysis paralysis, calm people take action. Even if it's imperfect action, they understand that movement creates momentum, and momentum often reveals solutions that weren't visible from a stationary position. They've learned that you can't think your way out of every problem. Sometimes you have to act your way into clarity. But here's where it gets really interesting. Calm people don't just manage stress better when it appears, they actually experience less stress in the first place, because they've eliminated many of the mental habits that create unnecessary stress. They don't create drama where none exists. They don't turn minor inconveniences into major catastrophes. They don't take other people's moods personally or assume responsibility for emotions that don't belong to them. This isn't because they're cold or disconnected, it's because they understand where their responsibility ends and other people's begins. They've also developed what researchers call cognitive flexibility. When their original plan doesn't work out, they don't cling to it desperately or collapse into despair. They adapt, they pivot, they find alternative routes to their destination. This mental agility prevents them from getting stuck in the rigid thinking patterns that trap so many people in cycles of stress and frustration. They hold their plans lightly, like suggestions rather than sacred commandments. Perhaps most importantly, calm people have learned to separate their identity from their circumstances. They don't define themselves by their temporary situations or emotional states. When something difficult happens, they don't think, "I'm a failure," or "my life is ruined." They think, "This is challenging and I'll figure out how to handle it." This subtle shift in language reflects a much deeper shift in self-concept. They see themselves as capable of handling whatever life presents, not because they're invincible, but because they've survived difficult things before and learned from the experience. Their relationship with failure is fundamentally different too. Most people treat failure like a verdict, a final judgment on their worth or capabilities, but calm people understand that failure is just feedback. It's information about what didn't work, not a commentary on who they are as human beings. This perspective shift eliminates the emotional devastation that typically follows setbacks. Instead of spiraling into shame or self-doubt, they get curious. They ask better questions. What went wrong? What can I adjust? What did I learn that I didn't know before? This doesn't mean they don't feel disappointment or frustration. They're human, after all. But they feel these emotions without drowning in them. They experience the feeling, acknowledge it, and then let it pass through them like weather moving across the sky. They don't resist the emotion or pretend it doesn't exist, but they also don't identify with it as their permanent state. There's a profound difference between saying "I am angry" and "I feel anger." One makes the emotion your identity, the other recognizes it as a temporary visitor. There's something else that sets calm people apart, something that might surprise you. They've developed an almost counterintuitive relationship with their own emotions. While most people try to avoid negative feelings at all costs, calm individuals have learned to welcome them as valuable information. They understand that emotions are messengers, not enemies. Anxiety might be telling them to prepare more thoroughly. Anger might be highlighting a boundary that needs to be set. Sadness might be processing a loss that needs to be grieved. By listening to their emotions instead of fighting them, they extract the wisdom these feelings carry without being overwhelmed by their intensity. It's like having a sophisticated early warning system that helps them navigate life's complexities with greater awareness and precision. They don't make major decisions when they're in the grip of strong emotions, but they don't ignore the information those emotions provide either. This emotional intelligence extends to how they interact with other people's stress as well. Calm people don't get pulled into other people's chaos. When someone around them is panicking, they remain centered. not because they don't care, but because they understand that adding their own anxiety to the situation won't help anyone. They become a stabilizing force, a calm presence that others can anchor to during turbulent times. They've learned something crucial about emotional contagion. Emotions spread from person to person like viruses, and most people unconsciously absorb the emotional states of those around them. If their coworker is stressed, they become stressed. If their partner is anxious, they become anxious. But calm people have developed emotional boundaries. They can be empathetic and supportive without taking on other people's emotional burdens as their own. This boundary setting extends to their relationship with information as well. In our hyper-connected world, we're constantly bombarded with news, social media updates, and other people's opinions about everything. Most people consume this information indiscriminately, letting it shape their mood and worldview without conscious filtering. Calm people are much more selective about what they allow into their mental space. They understand that their attention is their most precious resource, and they guard it accordingly. They don't need to know about every crisis happening around the world. They don't need to engage with every argument on social media. They don't need to absorb every piece of negative news that crosses their path. This isn't about being uninformed or uncaring. It's about recognizing that they can't solve every problem or fix every injustice, and that overwhelming themselves with information they can't act upon only diminishes their ability to make a positive impact where they actually can. Instead, they focus their energy on their immediate circle of influence, their family, their work, their community, their personal growth. They understand that creating positive change starts from the inside out, not from trying to manage the entire world's problems simultaneously. This focused approach allows them to be more effective and less overwhelmed. There's also something profound about how calm people view time itself. Most stressed individuals live in a constant state of time scarcity, always feeling rushed, always behind, always worried about not having enough time to accomplish everything they think they need to do. Calm people have a different relationship with time. They understand that time is not actually scarce, attention is scarce. There will always be more tasks than time, more opportunities than capacity, more demands than resources. They, rather than fighting this reality, they accept it and make conscious choices about where to direct their limited attention and energy. They don't try to do everything. They choose what matters most and let the rest go without guilt or regret. This selective focus creates a sense of spaciousness in their lives, even when their schedules are full. They're present for what they're doing instead of mentally multitasking across 17 different concerns. This presence extends to their physical experience as well. Calm people tend to be more connected to their bodies, more aware of physical sensations, more attuned to what their body needs. They notice tension before it becomes chronic pain. They recognize fatigue before it becomes exhaustion. They sense stress accumulating before it reaches crisis levels. This body awareness allows them to make small adjustments before small problems become big ones. They might take a few deep breaths when they notice their shoulders tensing. They might step outside for fresh air when they feel their energy flagging. They might choose to go to bed early when they sense their resilience is low. These seem like tiny actions, but they prevent the accumulation of stress that eventually overwhelms people who ignore their body's signals until they can't be ignored anymore. Perhaps most remarkably, calm people have developed what you might call stress immunity through exposure. Like a vaccine that builds immunity by introducing small amounts of a pathogen, they've learned to handle big stresses by successfully navigating smaller ones. They don't avoid all challenges or try to create a completely stress-free life. Instead, they gradually expand their comfort zone by taking on manageable challenges that stretch their capabilities without overwhelming them. Each time they successfully navigate a difficult situation, they build evidence for themselves that they can handle whatever comes next. This creates a positive feedback loop where confidence breeds competence, which breeds more confidence. They develop what psychologists call self-efficacy, the belief in their ability to handle whatever life presents. This belief becomes self-fulfilling because people who expect to handle challenges typically do. They also understand something that escapes most people caught in the stress cycle. The stories we tell ourselves about our experiences matter more than the experiences themselves. Two people can go through identical situations and have completely different emotional responses based solely on the narrative they construct around what happened. Calm people have become masters of reframing, not through denial or delusion, but through conscious choice about which aspects of a situation to focus on. When they lose a job, they might focus on the opportunity for growth, rather than the financial uncertainty. When a relationship ends, they might emphasize the lessons learned rather than the pain of loss. When they face a health scare, they might concentrate on gratitude for early detection rather than fear of the unknown. This isn't about pretending negative aspects don't exist. It's about choosing which lens to view their experiences through, understanding that the lens they choose will determine their emotional response. There's something almost mystical about how calm people relate to their own thoughts. Most of us identify completely with our mental chatter, believing every thought that crosses our mind as if it were absolute truth. But calm individuals have learned to observe their thoughts from a distance, like watching clouds pass across the sky. They understand that thoughts are just mental events, not commandments from the universe or accurate predictions about reality. This observer perspective allows them to catch stress-inducing thoughts before they spiral into full-blown anxiety. When they notice their mind starting to catastrophize, they can step back and question the validity of those thoughts. Is this thought helpful? Is it based on facts or fears? Am I solving a real problem or creating an imaginary one? This mental discipline isn't about suppressing thoughts, but about not being enslaved by them. They've also developed what you might call strategic ignorance about things that don't serve them. While curious and engaged with life, they've learned to be selectively oblivious to potential sources of unnecessary stress. They don't keep track of every slight, every unfairness, everything that could theoretically go wrong. They don't maintain detailed mental inventories of who owes them what or who said what about whom. This isn't about being naive or passive, it's about not wasting precious mental resources on information that doesn't help them live better. The way calm people handle criticism is particularly revealing. Most people either completely crumble under criticism or become defensively aggressive. Calm individuals have found a third option. They extract whatever useful information the criticism contains while discarding the emotional charge that often accompanies it. They can separate the message from the messenger, the feedback from the delivery method, the valid points from the personal attacks. This ability comes from having a stable sense of self that isn't dependent on external validation. They know who they are independent of other people's opinions. This doesn't mean they're arrogant or closed to feedback. They're actually more open to genuine feedback because they are not threatened by it. They can hear criticism without it destabilizing their entire self-concept, because their worth isn't up for debate every time someone disagrees with them. Their approach to decision-making reflects this inner stability as well. While anxious people often get paralyzed by too many options or tormented by fear of making the wrong choice, calm people understand that there are very few irreversible decisions in life. They make choices based on the best information available at the time, knowing they can adjust course if needed. They don't agonize endlessly over perfect decisions because they understand that progress matters more than perfection. This practical wisdom extends to how they view their own mistakes and regrets. Instead of carrying past errors like heavy backpacks full of shame, they treat mistakes as tuition paid for valuable lessons. They don't waste energy wishing they had done things differently because they understand that their past choices were made with the awareness and resources they had available at that time. Beating themselves up for not knowing then what they know now strikes them as both illogical and unproductive. There's also something profound about how calm people relate to their own mortality. While most people either avoid thinking about death entirely or become paralyzed by existential anxiety, calm individuals have made peace with their finite nature. This acceptance doesn't make them morbid or depressed. Instead, it creates urgency around what truly matters while eliminating anxiety about trivial concerns. When you truly understand that your time is limited, worrying about what strangers think of your outfit seems absurd. This mortality awareness influences their priorities in subtle but powerful ways. They're more likely to say no to obligations that don't align with their values. They're more willing to have difficult conversations that could improve their relationships. They're more inclined to pursue experiences that bring joy, rather than just accumulating possessions or achievements. They live with the awareness that this moment is the only one guaranteed to them, which makes them more present and less anxious about hypothetical futures. Perhaps most importantly, calm people have developed what you might call stress resilience through meaning-making. They don't just endure difficult experiences, they find ways to transform suffering into wisdom, pain into purpose, challenges into strength. This isn't about toxic positivity or pretending everything happens for a reason. It's about the very human capacity to create meaning from even the most difficult circumstances. They understand that while they can't always control what happens to them, they can always control what they make of what happens to them. This sense of agency, of being the author of their own story's interpretation, provides a foundation of inner strength that external circumstances can't shake. They know that no matter what life throws at them, they have the capacity to find meaning, learn lessons, and continue growing. So there you have it. The secret to becoming stress-resistant isn't about avoiding life's storms or pretending they don't exist. It's about fundamentally changing your relationship with uncertainty itself. These calm people aren't superhuman. They've simply learned skills that anyone can develop. They've trained their minds to create space between trigger and response, to stay present instead of living in fearful futures, and to find meaning even in difficulty. The question isn't whether you can develop this kind of unshakable calm. The question is whether you're willing to start practicing it today.